Welcome to the Leadership Blueprint Podcast. Today's guest is Shalloway, founder and CEO of Success Engineering, and one of the most respected thinkers in agile, lean, and large-scale organizational transformation. Al has spent decades helping leaders and organizations move beyond rigid frameworks and outdated constraints, focusing instead on practical, human-centered systems that actually work at scale. He's been deeply involved in shaping modern agile thinking, including being the first safe trainer outside of scaled agile, co-founding the Lean System Society, and created the Disciplined Agile Value Stream Consultant Workshop. Now, through Success Engineering, Al helps organizations bring training in-house at a fraction of the traditional cost, while making it more effective, more flexible, and more sustainable over time. Now, this conversation goes beyond agile as a method and into how leaders think, learn, and design systems that enable real value creation. I'm excited to dive into this one. Please welcome Al Shalloway.
Well, thanks, Jordan. I appreciate that.
My pleasure. Mr. Shalloway, how would you describe the work you do in leadership and executive development for someone hearing about it for the first time?
Well, the main thing is I believe that people, leaders in particular, know more than they're given credit for, and even to themselves. That we have a lot of tacit knowledge that we know how to do things, but we don't quite know what we do. And what I like to do is bring the skills leaders already have, the desires they already have, and take away the limitations that others have put on them, or they just haven't seen it yet. You don't see everything out there. We're all experts in particular domains. So I view my role is to open up possibilities for people who are already motivated, already want to learn, but just don't know some things. And if they did, they would do better. So I think where I come from is really the most important thing, because then it's how do I take advantage of what they know? How do I take advantage of what I know? And between the two of us and there are other people around them, how do we move forward and remove either self-imposed limitations we got when we grew up? I know that sounds funny, but we carry all this crap as kids that we learn from our parents and our friends. And if we like to think, no, we're beyond that, but I'm 73, I'm not beyond it. And I think I've moved okay. And when we can accept that about ourselves, we can think clearer and do better. So that's really what I do. Yes, I know a lot of things, but to be candid, it's not what I know. It's really the interaction and creating new opportunities for people that they have, but they may not be aware of.
Thank you for that intro. I'm very excited to dive into the different methods and frameworks that you use to help people essentially shine a new light onto their own being. I feel like coaches and consultants are extremely valuable for that one key piece is they can see outside of the box. They can see things that we can't see internally or in the mirror, if that makes sense. So let's kind of go back to what you said. Where you come from is extremely important. Was there a moment in time where you said, I want to study performance psychology. I want to be a leader amongst leaders, or was it more so a gradual process?
Well, I've always been interested in it. I actually have my honors in at Emory University was in psychology. I was a math major. I got really mathematics, bachelor's and math and master's, but I've always been interested in psychology. And I took the S training back in '83, which isn't offered now. It's now being offered by Landmark. I left it because it was a little cultish, to be honest, but that was because it made such a big impact. Like I used to be very introverted. I used to have troubles talking to people, and I used to have troubles thinking except in a totally logical manner. And I took the training in '83, and I saw what an impact it had on me and on other people in the room. It was very intense. And I said to myself, boy, these trainers, it wasn't the material, it was how these people interacted with us, how they got to the truth that we didn't even want to admit ourselves.
Mm.
Like like I said, I was introverted, but I didn't say I was introverted. I would tell myself, well, I don't interact with people because I just like interacting with my friends. If I go to a party, I'll take my girlfriend or my wife. Why talk to people I don't know? Truth is, I was scared to death of talking to people. And I was so impressed with these course leaders, workshop leaders. I said, I wish I could have that ability to do that. And it turns out the way I was and the limitations I'd put on myself was that was the reason I couldn't do it. So I started learning how to get past my limitations, and I started thinking, boy, it'd be so awesome to have those kind of skills. Now, I don't claim to have those kind of skills, but I've gotten a lot better And I do have impact with people. I've actually changed some people's life. I don't do life coaching in my workshops, but sometimes, and I say that, and I don't have the permissions, but I have some of those instincts. And I've had some interactions that totally shifted how someone looked at life and their role. And to be candid, I'm more proud of those than when I solve some technical issue, because there are so many people trapped in their own thinking
Mm.
and they don't see it. And there are ways to help people get out of it, not by coaching, by having insights and knowing how to get them to see those insights. So that's something, I definitely decided to do that like 83, 84 after being exposed to this. I said, wow, these people are amazing. If I could do that, it'd be great. It's been a long time.
No, you're all right. I'm actually curious, and I know the audience is dying as well, because I'm sure there's some viewers listening right now that would claim being introverted. What are some practical skills that you did when to break out of your shell to become the confident Al Shalloway you are today?
Well, part of it was realizing this fear had me think, I don't want to live my life out of these limitations. So once I knew it was a limitation, I would start putting myself into, well, I wouldn't put myself, but when I found myself in situations where I noticed fear, I wouldn't get out of them. I would stay in them.
Mm.
And I would just notice the fear and be with the fear and then act out of it with it anyway. And so it was, and then later, I took some other workshops and I got where I can now, I learned how to be present to my fear, but then act anyway. And out of that, it's just slowly been an evolution. Now, that's where the introverted to extroverted. And I'm not an extroverted person in a normal way. The other thing is I've been married to a wonderful woman for, depending on whether it was we had our first date or when we got married. I count from when we got married. She counts from our first date. It's been 36 to 38 years, and she's really effusive. So being
Congratulations, by
around
the way.
this wonderful personality for 36 to 38 years has had a big impact too. But it's really about making the commitment that I'm going to live how I want to live. I used to be able to do things by myself. Like I have my masters, two masters. One's in math from memory, the other's in computer science and electrical engineering from MIT. But the math I took was incredibly theoretical. And what I loved about it, you didn't have to talk to anybody.
Right.
Seriously.
In isolation.
And I got into programming because of that. But over time, I realized, the days of the 80s when you could build an application by yourself, those are gone. You can't get stuff done if you can't communicate to people. So it was not just a personal shift that I wanted to have more attachment to people. I wanted to be a bit less scientific and logical. I wanted to enjoy things more and more emotional. And, what can I say? Loving. I have a great family. This my wife now is my second wife, and I have a great family from before, but it was like wanting to grow into accepting that wonderfulness, and at the same time wanting to get better. So you today it's not an individual effort. I mean, an individual is important. I don't believe there's no I in team. I forget what book I read where he talks about that. You have to bring your responsibility and your powers to it, but you're focused on the team value. And I just discovered over time. I remember a workshop where it was about synergy, and I was so proud at first. Oh, look how I did better than anybody on my team. And then all the other teams better than my team, because by being so strong, I had pushed everybody else down. This was in 84, 85. And I realized, wow, Al, you can decide, do you want to be effective or do you want to be thought smartest? I mean, it was simple as that. I
Mm.
won't say that cured me. But once you start noticing that about yourself, you can start making choices.
I feel like becoming aware of those limiting beliefs and those fears is an essential step in
Absolutely.
changing.
Yeah, that's the real thing, and it's not just about ourselves. It's actually being aware of what opportunity possibilities are there. And it's so much more comfortable to be sure we know what we're doing. So we stay in that comfort, even if we know it's wrong, than to, oh my God, I don't know what's going on. That's terrifying. I've had, maybe at the time I didn't think it was good, but I've had lots of opportunities to be terrified. And every time what I noticed was it took me less time to get out of the fear. And that makes it easier.
And I also think what's extremely powerful about this is once you realize that fear itself cannot hurt you, it is truly just an emotion.
Yeah.
And you almost take back the power of fear. And I always go back to Batman with this because that's my favorite superhero. But he essentially made fear his power, if that makes sense,
That's
you
no,
know?
it does. It does. I'm glad you brought that up because it's funny. I remember when I saw the movie, I thought that was great. I love Batman too, but
Yeah.
in a lot of ways, he's stronger because he has a fear. Whereas, what does Superman have to be worried about? I know kryptonite, but not around. But the one of the acronyms I like about fear is false events appearing real.
False events appearing real. Yes, that is definitely the
And you just have to stop and ask, is it okay? And I've studied, I'm a big fan of Watts and Dispenza and Young, and I've studied a lot of them. I do a lot of life coaching too, or I get a lot of life coaching. And a lot of it turns out, do you have trust in the universe? I know this sounds kind of funny, talking business, but I believe this is important. I remember when I had Net Objectives, that was my company from 99 to 2019 before I was purchased by the PMI, and I left them about 4 years ago. But at Net Objectives, we had established a really good practice on design patterns. I used to be a 10X programmer. They do exist. I was one of them, and I was not always obnoxious. I was at the start, maybe.
You're fine, brother.
But well, I'm not embarrassed by my past. I did what I did, and I didn't kill anybody. I didn't break any laws, and I was good. I just wasn't always effective. But I remember, so we had this effective training. We trained thousands and thousands of people in being more technically proficient, and then we got into agile because I found the problem really wasn't with the developers. They just had it last, so it was their fault. But it wasn't really their fault a lot of the time. And I got into agile, and we're very effective with XP and Scrum, things like that. And then Kanban started coming out, and I said, "Oh my God, this is something new, and we're not good at this." And all of a sudden, I went from thinking I was up here to down here, and I was terrified. I really was.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Then I said after a couple of days, "Well, Al, you just got to learn. You learn what you learn. You can learn this." And as soon as I got over the terror, not the next day, but like I got into action, terror went away. And about a month later, in fact, I formed with David Anderson Lean Kanban University. I got to be an expert. Why? Because I knew lean, I knew flow. Something else happened. I can't remember when, but about a year later, something like this happened. And I got terrified. And then I thought, Al, remember the last time you got terrified? It wasn't that bad. And you came out on the other side better. So this is kind of what I call like a learning flywheel. As you face this stuff, it gets easier and easier. Oh man, I can remember times in the 80s where didn't know what to do, and it was so scary for me. This is my first consulting gig, so it was so scary for me to admit that. But when I did, they liked me better because they knew I was going to be honest and candid with them, and then we could work as a team. That look, here's what I know, here's what I don't know. And I thought I was supposed to know everything as a consultant. I learned that in 84, 85, I think it was, that they actually appreciated that. I was so sure that would be getting me out the door. Seriously, I was expecting to get fired when I said I didn't know how to do something. And they just said, "Oh, we'll help you." And I said, "Oh, good. If you'll help me, I can do it." But it's a muscle. Courage is kind of a muscle. A friend of mine, he's in my program, said something really brilliant. Fear is what you have. Courage is what you do. I thought
I like
that's
that
so
as well.
perfect.
No, yeah, it is. Speaking of your consulting days, think back when you were in the trenches. Were there a specific set of problems that your clients came to you with, but really those were just the surface level problems, and what they needed to do was fix the root cause to become a better leader or to get more effectiveness from the team?
Yeah, well, what people see as problematic is sometimes right, but very often they believe it's, oh, if only these people here would do what I say,
Hmm.
things will solve. Which I find really ironic because everybody's now saying Agile's great and Waterfall's bad. But look, back in the 80s, and there was such a thing as Waterfall. These people will tell me, "Oh, nobody did Waterfall. You weren't around in the 80s." I'm sorry. It was definitely that way. Changed review boards. It was horrible. And not everybody did Waterfall, but don't tell me nobody did Waterfall. And what the key was, well, if you would just do this, look, we're going to make our plan. We're going to lay it out. And if you would just do this, then we'll be okay. Well, laying out plans and just doing this or telling people to just do this don't work. So you have to get, so what I saw was they would want certain things. Sometimes they would say, "Well, if only people do this." And I would say, "Well, look, what's really going on here?" Now, sometimes I could get them past it because sometimes people are stuck. "Oh, they just have to work harder. I need to overload them." But a lot of the times I was brought in, they really didn't have a clue. They could give me the symptoms, but they had no idea what was. So they weren't saying solve this problem. They were saying, here are some symptoms. How do we get past these symptoms? And Agile's been very weak with this. In fact, look at Safe and Scrum, the two most popular methods out there. In fact, even less, which is much better than either of those, but it's still a framework. There's no diagnostic method. Here, do this and it'll fix it. So one of the first things I teach people, and I did this way back. I've got it explicit now, but back then I did it admittedly just instinct, what can I say, was, hey, let's look at what it takes to be effective. And they know what it takes to be effective. You got to know what your value is. You got to know what's more important than going to achieve it. You got to know if you've got the capabilities to do it. You may not be able to plan it all out, but you have to have a path to follow. So you can talk to them about what's working and what's not working. And so they may not know exactly when they bring me in, but it really doesn't take much to get them to see it. These are smart people who are just not down in the weeds. And they shouldn't be down in the weeds, but it's like what we call the Gemba in Lean, where the work actually takes place. And so one thing is to make them aware of what's going on. And when they're aware of what's really happening, most of them will want to do something about it. But they have to let go of a lot of crap that we've learned over time. Like, oh, we've got to keep people busy. People have to be utilized. People have to work hard. And that all sounds reasonable. I mean, if people aren't working, you're not getting anything done. But that doesn't mean that they're working on smart things. See, that they're working on things that they need to be working on. Maybe they're working on stuff that's how the system is. So one last thing on this, and then we go on. This is something I learned. I started studying Deming in 84, 85. I was very fortunate. I just got to know this incredible business consultant. And I started studying Deming and Toyota, actually, before people even talked about Toyota and Lean. This was 84, 85, 86. I took 2-year-long seminars with him. And it took me a long time to really understand systems thinking. This is what Peter Senge talks about, the fifth discipline and stuff. We're not naturally reflective as human beings. And the higher up you go, the more you have to be reflective, in my opinion, because it's not just you're impacting everybody under you and influencing those above you.
So true. Yes.
But, some people are scared to death of that. And I mean, seriously, you will not get them to be reflective. There are people who just don't want to be, but there are ways for most people to be guided into seeing why it's a good idea. And I think that's where knowing what to do is helpful. And then knowing how people are is important. And the agile, most business people seem to have split these two. Like, oh, well, here's how you do this. Here's how you do this. Here's how you do this. And then there'll be a separate thing. Oh, I'm a life coach. I'll help you in your life. And it doesn't work that way. You bring you and your personality to your work, and it has good things and bad things. And you need to help in both. I'll give one last personal example because it fits perfectly. So when I started Net Objectives, it was my first real I'd had a little management before. It wasn't my first company, and I'd had some employees, but it was the first main time I had a company, had people under me, and I was not a good manager. And I knew this. I mean, not people complained about me. They didn't. I wasn't a horrible manager, but I was not a good manager. And I had relived when I started consulting and coaching. I was a good trainer, but I was a bad coach because I wasn't patient. So I'd lived through improving in that already. And now as management, I remember thinking, oh, you're not a good manager. You get impatient, you get upset, you're not guiding people. And here I am teaching all those things on how to do it to other people. Do what I say, not what I do. I mean, I was actually a pretty good consultant telling you what to do, but I wasn't doing it. So I noticed that disparity. And it probably took about 4 or 5 years. Just being aware doesn't cure you. I wish it did. Anybody who has kids knows this, or if you've been a kid, you know this. So that's the other thing. You have to have, it's kind of weird because it's not like you have to be upset that you're not at the goal, because you're not. Don't be upset with yourself. It wasn't guilt, but I could see, here's where I am, here's where I wanted to be. And I could see this tension, this disparity. And I would judge myself less and less and less. I'm actually pretty free of self-judgment. I mean, it pops up, but then it goes away. That's part of the life coaching. So this is an important thing, is to accept where you are, but see where you want to go. And then how do you go there? And that's part of the coaching I give, is you can't just talk about the future. You got to see where you are. Accept it. What's the path there? And there are both personal paths and there are technical paths, and you have to look at both of them and move them together, and they interact with each other. And this, in business consulting, the fact that they're done as separate things. Now I want to be clear, and then I will stop.
The floor is yours. No, please take all the time you need, my friend.
I'm not saying I do therapy in these sessions. I don't do that. I don't have permission to do that. And actually, I won't say I'm not good at it because I am when I get into it. Actually, some of my in-laws, like my daughter-in-law, she loves talking to me. So, oh, Al, it's so good talking to you, dad to her, it's so good talking to you because you understand these things, so I actually could do that. But I don't do that. Why? Because it's not what I've been given permission to do. So what I do is, because I've gone through this horror story myself with a happy ending, is I can see what's missed by people. I can hear those conversations kind of, I mean, not like really, but I get some good insights on those conversations. And I could ask questions that let them discover what's true for them. And that took me years to get to that point. At first I would think, oh, I know what's going on, I'm going to tell them. No, it doesn't work. But you can get a sense out of empathy. I'm much more empathetic. We joke, like I mentioned, my wife, she's one of the most empathetic, loving people I've ever met. And she's taught me how to be empathetic and loving, and I've taught her how to be a wise ass. But I appreciate her smart aleckness, so that's a good thing. But that's true.
Right, right. No, I do want to say a couple of things
Sure.
on
Yeah,
what you just
please, please.
discussed. I'm extremely spiritual, so you bringing up Watts and
Oh, yeah.
Dispenza, I'm like, no, no, that's music to my ears. I feel like I can have a whole podcast just on that alone.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No,
So
I actually had an out of body experience reading Alan Watts's The Wisdom of Insecurity back in '83. I can
really,
remember it. I can remember where I was. I can remember it only lasted about 30 seconds to a minute, but it was really cool.
that's all you need, yeah, to have a
You
well-rounded
do it
mind.
once and you go, wow, this is really amazing.
Yeah, yeah. I meditate every day.
Yeah,
I
same.
also perform self-hypnosis if people are into
Cool. I don't
that.
do the self hypnosis, but I meditate every day. Oh, and I was not on drugs when that happened, just to be clear.
Thank you, thank you. But I do kind of want to steer the conversation though,
Sure. Yeah, please
because
do. I'm kind of rambling. Go ahead.
no, no, you're totally fine. But with the limiting beliefs, because since birth we are just infinitely conditioned from childhood, friends, our culture. What would you say to someone to break these negative habitual patterns or these negative conditions? And I know being aware of it is step one, but okay, cool, I'm aware of it. I know I have a horrible habitual mindset. How do I fix this? As an
Yeah.
example.
So I think awareness, again, the thing, and also naming it. So I actually created a term for it. I call it automatic interpretive reframing. And here's a simple example. If you've ever driven a car, you've experienced. You're driving and somebody cuts you off. Now, a logical person would like to think that what they do is, that guy just cut me off. I wonder how I should respond to this. Should I just brush it off? Maybe he's going someplace, or should I just give him the finger? See, I'm going to give him the finger is an automatic interpretation that guy's a jerk. It's not something you think about, but it's something our mind does all the time, and it limits what we can see. So the thing to do is to notice it and to decide, do you want to live out of it or not? And if you don't, and you can't make yourself wrong for doing it because you aren't doing it. You're not telling your heart to pump. You're not telling your lung. Well, you might be doing breathing because we have some control over that. We have no control over this. This is what in S they call getting it, this automaticity. It's not quite Kahneman's thinking slow, but thinking fast, but it's related to the brain function. So you notice it, and then you kind of decide if you could just take a breath when the emotions strike you. That's why meditation's so good. I'm also meditating
Yes,
every day
yes,
because
yes.
because when you get familiar with the meditation and the peacefulness that gives you and the power, your own intrinsic power that gives you, then you notice you're not that. And then if you could start noticing you're not that, it doesn't mean it solves. I can remember this time I was waiting in this line. I was kind of proud of myself. Oh, I'm learning how to calm down, and I'm waiting in this line. They have this stupid way of getting into this complex, and I'm saying I'm going to keep calm. I'm going to be nice. When I get to the front, the fact that I've waited here for 30 minutes when it could have been 5 minutes if they'd done it well. And then, of course, to get up to the front, and I'm really, and I say, well, you blew that one. And,
Well, I
I
did my
used to have
best,
this,
right?
the joke in my family is I have tone. I can make my daughter cry, just not by what I said, but the tone I used and how I'm not kidding. This is where my wife's been great because I didn't realize the father is the most important person in a daughter's life. And that meant something to me. So we have a fabulous relationship. Again, it took several years. So it's if you notice it and are committed to improving, and meditation's good. Acknowledging yourself is good. being blessed, noticing what you have to be grateful for. That's a habit I try to do every day. I'm grateful. I wake up and I look at what I'm grateful for. Well, the fact that I woke up should be grateful. And then I think of all the wonderful people around me and the opportunities and even your challenges. Now, I'm not saying challenges are opportunities. I mean, challenges are opportunities, but I'm not saying that because that's just gotten to be Pollyanna and too light. But to me, when you have a challenge and you're thinking about it, this means you're expanding. You're working on a problem that if you solved would make a difference. So sometimes even challenges are like, well, I want to figure this out. And I look to see, are there people around me who are helping me? And it's amazing how much that shows up. It's like just serendipitous, although it's called synchronicity, where the universe is helping you. This is where I love Watts because he talks about trusting the universe. And
Mhm.
I believe I trust the universe a lot more now than I used to. And otherwise, I pretend I'm in control. And that's where fear comes from. Because, hate to tell you, you ain't in control, folks.
We cannot control anything past our fingertips. I truly do believe the universe has our back.
I do.
You know, like everything always somehow magically works out.
Yeah. And you have a lot to do with that, but not control over it.
When you are working with clients, is there a core philosophy or belief that kind of shapes how you work with these leaders?
Yeah. Yeah. The first one is I always come from they're doing their best and that they want to learn. And sometimes they don't show up that way. And sometimes they aren't that way. But the first thing is to know that, I mean, to like know it as a belief. I mean, I know there are some jerks out there. Okay. And I've run a few of them, across a few of them, and I've had a couple of failures, not that many. And the reason is most people, even when they show up in a negative way or a controlling way, they're that way because of the system they're in and the belief system that's on themselves now. And if you could get them to see something else, they shift. So that's one thing. I come from, they really want to get this done. And most of the time, that's true. And if I discover it isn't true, and that sometimes happens, but not very often because people won't want to work with me unless there's some of that. But I've had a few where they're just doing a facade. But so that's the first thing. The second thing is I'm a big believer that a lot of the problems people say are not possible are possible. I've had a history of this. When I was at MIT, we worked on a problem, actually histocompatibility. Now, we didn't succeed, but that's because we blew how we did the research, not because it wasn't possible. But we were working on doing blood typing for kidney transplants so it can be done in a day instead of at the time it was taking too long. And, the kidneys, if it came from somebody who died, would no longer be viable. And then when I went IBM. I worked at IBM Research for a year, and I was the grunt Fortran programmer, so I'm not taking any credit for the smarts of this. This was in 77, 78, but we solved something that at the time was considered the most complex problem ever solved by a computer and we'd been told mathematically was impossible, and yet we solved it. The guy who was doing this actually predated neural nets, but that's what we were kind of doing. So that was just two. I've done other things, and I've seen other people do other things. So I'm confident we can get a lot more done. And this is one of the learned helplessness. So I believe people are good. I believe most people have a certain degree of learned helplessness that either comes from the trauma we had as kids, the imprinting of what we can't do or can do or things like that. So psychologically getting around that. But yeah, I know things are complex. I know we can't predict things out. But if you study people like Tom Gill, Don Reinertson, I cannot say the guy's name, but who wrote How Big Things Get Done, Bent, I think is his first name, but How Big Things Get Done, this whole idea that we can't meet deadlines, that we can't get things done, this whole limited thinking. So what I try to do is look to see which of these they have and then show them other opportunities. And a lot of this isn't like me being inventive. It's more me being open. Look at Toyota. Toyota disproved the iron triangle back in the 60s, 60 years ago. They showed that if you work on your process and on learning and on focusing on quality, that by focusing on quality, you can eliminate rework by getting quick feedback to eliminate delays. Now, you don't do it exactly the same in product manufacturing as you do in product development, but the idea of this focus on quality, continuous learning, improving your systems, that you don't work faster or harder. What you do is you stop working on wasted effort. You stop reworking. In our world of building products, you don't build something that doesn't work for the customer and then you got to rebuild it. No, every now and then because people aren't building inventive products all the time. If it's something completely new, you have to do it a little different. But most of the stuff we do, there's no reason extra work should be being created while you incrementally discover what's needed. It's like driving in fog. You don't hit one tree and then decide, oh, I got off the road, now fix my car and go forward. No, you go at a certain pace and you can see a certain amount ahead and you take advantage of that and what you know. And this is not taught in the mainstream product development, but I'm not unique. TOC, Theory of Constraints, Tom Gelb's Evo, Don Reinertson, the people who, Eliyahu Goldratt, who's passed away a few years ago, I learned this from them, or I learned how to do it from them. I think I had a feeling it could happen, but I learned all this from them. Unfortunately, it's not that it's harder to do this. It's actually faster, easier, and less expensive. But the reason it's not done is it's scary, because you have to think, you have to take responsibility, you have to own it, you have to have agency. It actually is much faster, much more effective, and much less expensive in time and money. But a lot of people say, well, I'm going to just go get this framework and apply it, because it's like in the 70s when I was at IBM, nobody got fired for buying IBM. It wasn't always the good choice. They didn't have the best equipment. They had the best marketing people and the best support people. And I'm proud to have worked there. I have good feelings about IBM, and I think they've transformed themselves. So it's interesting, because this goes back to the whole fear thing. That subconscious fear about I am now responsible keeps us from making better decisions, and we buy into these safer approaches, especially with executives and leaders, because you're busy. You've got a lot of stuff to do. So I'm always coming from what's possible and not being Pollyanna. What's possible, and then I look to see what's stopping it. I look to see what they see is stopping it. I look to see how I can help them. And a lot of the times in business, there's not an appreciation for what's possible. And I mean possible like right away. I'm not talking long term. There's always something right away.
Understood. Thank you for that. What do you feel like has been the most challenging aspect when it comes to communicating your expertise and your value to C-level executives or even CEOs?
Well, when I can get in front of them, I'm actually really good, but I'll be candid here. And it's funny, because I've been realizing how, Al, you're not walking your talk in this one. So I have been, when I left the PMI 4 years ago, what I decided to do, my wife said, hey, maybe you ought to retire, take it easy. And I said, that's not going to happen, but I'll take a month to think about what I want to do.
I don't believe in retirement. I don't think.
Yeah, I don't either.
Yeah.
So I looked at it. So I built a Discipline Agile Value Stream Consultant workshop. It's actually the first, and they've disbanded it now at the PMI. It was the only, and now I have something like this, which was not an approach, but how do you, as a consultant, diagnose systems, see what needs to happen, and then here are the methods to it. And it had never been complete for me. I intentionally designed it to be incomplete. One of the reasons I left was you can only do so much in a course. I had wanted to create this community where people could get the rest of it, but I couldn't get PMI to go along with it. I left. But so I decided that what I wanted to do was to create a how do you be effective as a consultant? And then over time, not too long, I worked for a year still teaching Discipline Agile, but then the next year I started teaching some of my workshops. And what I found was people were saying, wow, that's great. This is wonderful. I really understand this, but how do we get other people to know what it is? So I got into this, okay, I need to integrate coaching. So I did that. And then I realized the format's wrong. You cannot do 2-3 day workshops are about 80% waste of time. They're very exciting. Now, if you do it in your own company, that's a good thing, because they'll work together and they'll learn how to do things. But as an individual, you're learning information, and most of it goes away in 2 or 3 days. So I kept working on this format. And basically, up until now, in the last 3 months, there's just been this amazing transition where I believe I finally solved some of the major problems. See, I'm up to dropping costs by 90% of training and increasing productivity by that. Look, we're on Zoom. Why couldn't we not have 30 people live in a session, but another 100 or 200 people are listening to the recording later when they have time? You don't have time to take workshops in the day. So how do you do live training, but on your schedule, which sounds contradictory, but I figured that it took me a long time, but I figured that out. How do you integrate coaching in? But not how do you explain an approach? See, this is maybe the biggest difference. Amplio, my approach, used to be, here's a system like Disciplined Agile was, and here's how you use it. And now, no, I don't have that anymore. All the pieces are there, but it's architected as, what are your problems? And here's, oh, pull this thing out to solve that problem. Pull this thing out to solve that problem. And so I know this sounds like an off topic answer, but I'll explain it. So up until about now, to be candid, I haven't felt comfortable really just going all out there, because the other question is, how do you bring this into a company so they can use the approach, license free and all that? And see, the problem we have today is people are undereducated. They don't know what most of the problems, virtually every problem that's not, maybe I've got a bad manager, I've got a friend of mine who works at a company where some billionaire owner who's just come in and controlling the whole thing, and there's no hope. That I can't change that. I do not, I'm not Al Capone, who talks about, you can get more with a smile and a gun than you can with a smile alone.
I like that quote. That's hella funny.
So I don't do that. It doesn't work. So the thing is, up until now, this is why I say I'm not walking my talk. I know you don't build the whole thing, but to be candid, it's been changing and morphing. I wasn't that excited about it. I always look at what was wrong with it. And now we actually have figured out how people who are busy can, just do a couple hours a week on their schedule, but you'll still have live, how to do it internally, HR for onboarding or a training company. And I guess I'm sure it's going to get better even so, because I never kind of satisfied. But I've hit the bar, my minimum bar. And maybe I shouldn't have, I was thinking of it this morning. And I was thinking, well, maybe you just should have gone out more than I have. But I'm happy. I've got like 30 people in my workshop now where we've been working on this together, and it's not like I figured it out by myself. I figured it out with these people, or I see what the challenges are. So I haven't really gone out there like I should have or could have. I'm fine where I am. I've got some learning and some meditation on this, I suppose.
No worries. How often do you and your workshop, I guess, group members get together?
Well, we have this set structure. So like on Tuesday mornings and Tuesday afternoon Pacific time, we get together for an hour and a half, and I present some new material and we discuss it and all that. And I write a lot of things. And then I have a few of the people in the program who are like partners. They're going out using this stuff. And we meet Friday mornings to talk about things. And then Wednesday mornings, I have a free open to the world where I'm just discussing like how to break out of learned helplessness and some good practices. So the point is this, you could do a lot of stuff, 4 or 5 hours a week, I suppose. Most people don't have that amount of time. So we figured out how to create this. I've got a learning management system I use. So how can people have a problem and go look in the learning management system and see what to do? And then when they have a question, which sometimes they will, sometimes they won't, they can just join any of the live sessions, which are 4 times a week, and get questions answered. So it's this design where you can drive. What are your problems? And it's like you go to a library of materials, and then sometimes you just need to be told, here's how to do it. And sometimes you need to be told that, and you say, well, Al, that didn't work. I'm having problems. And then you need coaching and coaching. So I integrate coaching and train the trainer. Everything I teach you how to teach it. And because it gets you to understand it deeper.
I was just going to say, whenever you teach something, you actually internalize it.
That's right. Yeah. See, I learned this when I first started doing design pattern trainings 30 years ago, that if this was my instincts, like I said, I was a 10X program. It was really fast, but I couldn't always explain what I was doing. And now I was using patterns to explain it. So if this was my instinct, or my ability, say, was instinctual, but what I could explain was down here. What I noticed is that when I forced myself to explain better, and this would go up more too. That's how I think about it. The more explicit you can understand what you're doing, the more intuition you have about it. And this is something to teach executives and managers. A lot of people, especially at this level, I would say they have 2 types of things they're not aware of. One is, I'll say the good thing first, they know how to do some things, they just know how to do. And if they can learn a little bit better how to explain that, they're more effective, and they can get their people around them to do. And the other one is they have limited beliefs. I remember back in the 80s, I had a client where their president was absolutely certain you push people hard and you get them to work hard, and they're gonna do better than they would when they weren't working hard. No chance by me to get them out of that. I had no idea how to do it. And the reason was I didn't have a theory to explain why that was wrong. And you want people to be motivated, but when you push them too hard, they start getting into task switching. They have too much work on their plate. They're not taking the time to focus on the right things. I didn't know that back in the 80s. That was about the time I was getting into studying Deming. And then I realized, oh, you really got to look at the bigger picture. These managers should have been working on how do I make it so people are in an effective way so they're always working on something of value rather than they're always busy. Those are two different questions and you'll get two different answers. And that's where I'm actually, I think, really good. I've actually had impact interacting with people, executives, board members, things like that. And they don't often, I shouldn't say that. Many I've run across don't often take the time to be reflective about what's driving them. And part of that is the same way I didn't know fear was driving me. I had a good explanation for it. Oh, this is just what you do. And taking a little time to ask yourself about that makes a huge difference. And it's often not hard. It's just like you said, you need somebody out of the box.
Yeah. I kind of want to dive into your core concepts, your core frameworks that you use whenever you are working with these C-level or CEOs. Do you mind giving us like one example or something at a
Sure.
very
No,
high
no, no,
level?
not at all. It's actually a combination of a few things. First of all, I recognize, you have to recognize that we cannot predictably go out here, we're going to build this, this, this. No, you cannot do that. But there is something that Ellie Goldratt, the creative theory of constraint, says it's very important, and I definitely believe. He called it inherent simplicity. That at the core of any system, there are a few things that have the causes and effects going on. Now, what people misinterpreted, he didn't say you see them all. He just said they're there. So things like if you overload people and you inject delays in the workflow, then they're not going to be as efficient, and your delays in feedback means you're going to do more rework than you need to. So focusing on value, focusing on eliminating delays in your workflow so you can get quick feedback. Those are examples in product development. So the first thing is to understand what those are, and then to say, yeah, but since I don't know everything, what do I do when something blindsides me? Well, see, here's what's really weird. What causes the problem is not so much you were blindsided by it, but that you had no way to recover from it and you didn't notice it. There's a great lesson, and in fact, somebody wants to see this. It's a great documentary on the Piper Alpha. This was a oil rig in the North Sea that blew up. And what caused it was there were a couple of things, the way they stored documents, believe it or not, caused a cascading series of events. I think this was Seconds from Disaster. Great show. And this thing, always National Geographic, this thing, what you see is you've got this complex system and a little thing happens, like 3 Mile Island is an example. Chernobyl, although Chernobyl was designed bad. That was a disaster waiting to happen from the beginning, the way it was designed. I study disasters for two reasons. I find them fascinating, and it reminds me that these were smart people doing stupid things. And I'm a smart guy, probably do stupid things too. So got to self-aware. So you've got to recognize there's something to know what's going on, and you've got to protect yourself when you don't know it all, because you don't know it all. I don't care how smart you are. It's the nature of the beast. So then you go, what works and what doesn't work, and you've got to attend to people. This is, to me, the biggest thing that's being ignored. You cannot tell people what to do. You've got to give them the light at the end of the tunnel. You got to give them the reason. So there's this integration of what can we do? What's holding us back? How do I get people motivated because they want to be motivated, not out of fear and not out of authority? This whole authority or responsibility conversation is ridiculous. So I've been CEO of companies for years, and authority is overrated, at least for me, because you can tell them what to do and they'll just do what they want anyway. The fact that, okay, you can fire them so they won't let you know what they're doing. I mean, it feels good to say, oh, yeah, I'm the man, but I'm sure every CEO executive knows what I'm talking about. And it's frustrating until you accept it. And then it's like, okay, what do I do? So that's the other conversation you have to have. And I'm not talking about big changes. That's the other thing. No, I don't have a magic wand. I wish I did. I don't. So the question then is, how do you get people to make small changes because it's in their best interest and your best interest that they do that? And if you have people working for you that what's in their best interest does not do you any good, you got to let go of them, seriously. And if you're working on things that aren't in their best interest, well, some places in the economy you can get away with it. But at some point, your good people are going to leave. That's the best way. The best way to make sure all your good people leave and all the ineffective people stay is to basically don't give opportunity for the good people because they'll find it somewhere else. And you see this, and it takes maybe a little courage, but just again, look at how you grew up, what you did, and who attracted you and what you're doing. And it sometimes this thought keeps crossing my mind, so I'm going to say it.
Yep.
Something I in the 80s again, I was working with another consultant. He'd brought me in for some reason. And he was actually a really brilliant guy. And he asked me something. He said, Al, because I had this vision of what I was going to do. And he said, Al, if you could get that result, but you wouldn't get credit for it, would you do it? And what I realized was no, but I should. No, I was very clear. If I didn't get credit for it, I wasn't going to do it. And I was also
Right.
clear that was the wrong answer.
What's the point? I get no credibility
Yeah,
for this.
but at least I was
Nothing.
honest with myself. You know what I mean? So it was like that was a little bit of a wake up call. In fact, I have this. My daughter did this art for me. It says, "The Great Spirit only wants that there be flying, and who does it, and that she has but a passing interest." And that was back in the '80s, and that's something to look at. So part of what I do is I want to see what their spirit wants to be flying, and then how do they get there. And most executives, I don't know, most of the executives I've run across, I should say that most of the executives I've run across wants there to be flying, and they're more interested in their company flies than they get credit. Now, Lee Iacocca was just the opposite. The guy was brilliant, turned Chrysler around, but it didn't last. You have to change the culture, not just be a rah rah, let's go. It doesn't last.
Just culture is so important. On that note, do you have any case studies or any examples when you work with previous clients and you did change their culture? Or it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be culture related, just any case studies that you would love to share for the audience.
Yeah, I'll give you one, and I want to explain culture for one thing. First of all, culture is not
Please.
bad. A lot of times, and changing culture is not something you do like this. In fact, you can't change culture directly. There was a really good book by David Mann called "Creating a Lean Culture." It was really good, but I don't recommend it to
Interesting.
people. Yeah, it's weird. I'll tell you why I don't recommend it.
Yeah.
If you're a lean person and understand that lean is an approach, not something to do, and that lean transcends manufacturing, and you take that some of the underlying thoughts in manufacturing and apply them to product development. If you got that, then this is a great book. But he's talking about lean manufacturing, and a lot of people will say to themselves that doesn't apply in product. Well, the exact things don't, but this abstract philosophy does. What he said is culture can't be changed directly, but it's a reflection of the management system you have. So if people make a mistake and you get on their case, if people do something wrong and you blame them, if people try something new and it doesn't work and things happen and you're creating fear in your culture, it's because of the management system. Notice he didn't say managers, he said management system. So what he suggests is you create visibility about what's going on and you improve your management, you improve your perspectives. So here's an example of how I did that. And sometimes this takes just a day or two. I mean, seriously, 2 or 3 days. Sometimes it takes forever. But I was working with a company where they were working on the maintenance of an old military aircraft. So in this aircraft, there were like 7 different systems. There was like the AWAC system. There was 2 or 3 gun control systems. There was, you're always communicating with other things. So, the days of just being by yourself doesn't happen anymore. There was a network, there was communications. Anyway, there were 7 of these things. And the problem they had was that the systems that this aircraft uses were built in the 60s, and that you literally could not run it on a PC. The software would not run on a PC. You could write it on a PC, get translated. So you needed test platforms that were this old equipment. You had something like 50 people, 50 devs. So this was a group. It wasn't the whole company, but it's a microcosmic example. So you had these 50 devs working on 4 test platforms. There was a simulator and 2 planes, but those were never there, the simulators. So you had 5 platforms you could use all the time, and the planes were usually gone. So what they had was the culture when I showed up was one of every of the 7 teams, that was about 50 devs all told, were like, well, we get our stuff done and you get your stuff done, and we'll collaborate when some request requires 2 of these components, because usually 80% was they were independent of each other, or maybe a little less than that, but most of it independent. So I show up, and what I notice right away is the problem they have is two things. One is testing is difficult because what would happen is 4 platforms, 50 people. So in the day, one person might use the test platform, get his stuff done, but then the next person, when they would do it 2 weeks later, they would find they didn't work, but that's 2 weeks. Who knows what you've done since? So what people would do is they would check out the machines at night. They would rotate coming in the middle of the night to run their testing. And even then it was days later. Now, if you've never developed software, here's the problem with that. If you do something and then the next moment you find out something's wrong, you can fix it like that because it's top of mind. But a week later, you have no idea what happened. This is why one reason XP is good. But anyway, so what you had was this culture of team. Each of the 7 teams were about each of the 7 teams. And the technical problem was that they needed to collaborate and work together. And no method at this time, there wasn't a lot of theory about flow or stuff. So what I did was I was trying to explain to them. Now I saw immediately what they needed to do. I mean, literally within hours, I said, oh, I see what they need to do. But well, actually, that's not true. Within hours, I had this thought of what they needed to do, and I asked them, and that was not going to work for them because of the culture there. They liked being on separate platforms. They didn't like cross-functional teams at the time. But then an hour or two after that, like the middle of the first day, I knew what they needed to do, but I didn't tell them. And the reason I didn't tell them was because, first of all, they probably wouldn't have done it. And second of all, if they did do it, when I left, it would stop working because we wouldn't have solved the problems. I needed them to get to the solution. And the problem was that the way they were organized did not match what I call the physics of flow. In other words, these delays in doing the integration were too high. They needed to fix the delays in getting the integration. But the reason they had it was this team centricity. I remember this guy. This was a long time ago, and I still remember this guy. It's so amazing. So the manager of one of the groups, which was known as the best group, they always got their stuff done. By the morning of the next day, they now have this theory. They now understand what they should do, but they didn't want to do it yet. And this guy stands up and he says, if I agree with you, and I do, my team needs to slow down so they can help the other team slow down. And I don't want to slow down. I was impressed because his manager was in there. And for somebody to say that with your manager present. So a couple hours later, he gets up and he says, Al, if I agree with you and I do, my team needs to slow down, and I'm not going to slow down. I'm serious. He said it twice. And I don't know if it was the third or the fourth time, but at some time he said, Al, if I agree with you and I do, my team needs to slow down, and we're going to slow down. I still get chills when I think of this. Now, at that point, the culture changed. He changed the culture, not me. And he changed it from being a team-centric group to a product. We are, and this was important. This was a shooting aircraft. I said they had weapons on it. You don't have the ability to reboot your machines when you're being shot at. Well, you have the ability, but it ain't going to reboot. You'll be down before they come back up. So culture changed there. It's usually not instant like that, but this was a small group. The way you change large cultures, and we did that too. There was a great example. We were working with this big retail bank, like one of the top 5 banks in the world, just their retail division. So it was big, but it wasn't like billions. It was like, I guess, a few $100 million, the group we were working with. And when we got there, their idea was working on everything. And we asked them, well, how many projects are you working on? And they said, we got 275 projects. How many have you ever done in a year? 50. Do you think maybe you got too many?
Right.
Well, we got them down to 75, which wasn't 50, but massive improvement. Absolutely. Now, just think about that. Now, what did that do? That was the initiation of a culture change. Because did they start working on 75 properly? No, we had to train them in that. But by working focused on value instead of focusing on being busy, by working on aligning, which we showed them how to do, by aligning to get value, that changes the mental state of things. So there are ways to do it in little bits. And if you're a big company, it's almost the only way to change it. Now, there are exceptions. I was not involved in this, and this is public knowledge, so I'll explain this. Salesforce had a massive, I'm talking 2 decades ago. I was not in, well, I had one of my guys there as one of the coaches, but Pete Behrens did it. So I take note, I had a smart guy there, but he just was helping Pete. So I know a little bit about what happened because of one of my guys being there. The Salesforce CEO said, look, we're going to work more as a team, and we're going to do this incremental stuff, and anything that's in the way of it, You come to me and I'll get it out of the way. Now, that didn't change culture of Salesforce like that, but it started a shift.
Yeah.
So how you manage, how you evaluate people, how you're focused on value. And most of what I see out there, they're not focused on value. They're focused on features and stories and stuff like that. They talk about users and customers. I hate to tell you, some of the most important people in a company are never even addressed by product development today. And that's the sponsoring stakeholders, executives. Why are we doing this? I'll say one last joke and I think it completes it. I've sometimes got really mad at Microsoft. People say, well, they should always give you what the customer wants. I'm a customer of Microsoft. They buy a lot of furniture. I am sure that if they sold furniture to me, I could get it at a better rate than what I'm paying for. Why aren't they? I'm a customer. Why aren't they satisfying my needs? I mean, I'm being facetious, obviously.
Right.
The point is you don't satisfy just the customers. You get to choose what customers and what value you're committed to creating to satisfy those customers. So if you don't pay attention to the sponsoring stakeholders, the executive's business, the consuming stakeholders, the constraining stakeholders like the government agencies you've got to live with, and what I call the value adding stakeholders, which are your development team, your product owners, the people that are doing the work. There's this myopia of just looking at a few things. And then people wonder why they're having troubles. It's like driving by sound. That's a joke. You got to think about that for a second.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to go too well. Right?
No, it's like, but that's how people run their business. They run their business like they're driving by sound. Well, actually, nowadays the sounds help because your car beeps when somebody's near you. But I mean, if you don't have that kind of, I'm saying you don't have not the warning system sound. I mean, the crashing sound.
Right, right. And I do have one last question for you, because you were a successful CEO, or still a successful CEO, for several different operations. You had coaches underneath you, consultants underneath you. What would you say to any new consultant getting started in leadership when it comes to attracting clients? Because everyone, from my experience, a lot of these guys are definitely experts in the field, but maybe business acumen or marketing acumen, they're kind of a little not strong in that area.
Yeah. Well, actually, I used to be better at this than maybe I am now because I've been focusing more on building this platform. But what you have to do is you have to look at what is the value. Not you have to look at what is the value your client wants, and then how do you get them to get there. And sometimes that involves actually shifting their conversation on values. So I'll give you another case study. I went into a company. I was actually teaching them design patterns, how to write code and architect. But we were kind of a little ahead of the game, and they said, "Hey, would you talk to our executives?" And I said, "Sure, I'd love to talk to them." So I had a lunch with all the top. This wasn't a huge company, but a few hundred people, and I'm talking to them, and I'm telling them about how we want to build things incrementally and focus on value. And the marketing guy, it's funny, he was just sitting right to my right. So I am telling him that, we should, what's most value and build things incrementally. He says, we can't do that. And I said, and now this is the big thing. Don't think when you know what you know. They know more than you know about what their business is. Now, maybe they're wrong, but you've got to understand where they're coming from. So I asked him, I said, you can't do this. And I said, well, why not? Now, I didn't say like, why not? Because I know I'm right and he's wrong and they can't do this. I have no idea. So he says, well, because our customers look at the feature list and they won't buy from us unless we have all the features. This was some sort of networking application. Now, is that true or not? I don't know. So I said, oh, so, you have to have all these features. I said, so now I ask him this because I don't know what he knows. I said, do you know that the more features you have, the longer it takes to build them and the more it takes to maintain them? And he said, sure. Okay, now I take that at his face value. And I ask him this, do the customers use all the features? Because maybe he's right. If they use them all, they need them all. He said, no, they don't use them all. Do they discover that they don't use them all? He said, yeah, after they get the system, they realize they don't need them all. So see, now a new opportunity showed up in my head, but not for his. The reason in my head is I've seen customers not need all the features, and that's the way he's been running his business. So I ask him this question, and I really have no idea what he's going to say. I say, well, what would you rather be known as? The company that has all the features, even if not all of them are used, or the company that has those features you need, and we could build the ones that we'll discover later faster, that when new technology comes in. So did you want to have, I got the bulk, but I'm slow to change, or do I want to have what you need and I'm quick to change? And that question had never occurred to him.
Mm.
And I can remember he had this blank look on his eye, and he looked, and then he said, "Oh, I'd rather be the company that gives you what you need and can give you what you need in the future faster." So they switched just like that. This is an example as a consultant. See, I didn't know something and told it to him. I inquired with him in a way we could discover something better. You have to recognize. I learned this from Jerry Weinberg's Secrets of Consulting book, which I didn't believe when I first read it. You don't want to be so far out of them that they are intimidated by you. You want to work with them as partners. So that would be one thing. You've got to be comfortable in your discomfort of not knowing what to do. I don't know how else to say it.
You can't. I call this like pushing product or pushing your knowledge down someone's throat. It
Yeah,
kind
you
of
can't
reminds
do
me
that.
of newer salespeople. You really have to take a collaborative effort with your
That's
clients, and
right.
that goes for me, and that goes for any consultant out there in the space.
Yeah, I can give you a quick thing I always do. I always do this. Two things I do when I start an engagement. More so with when I'm brought in to help other people, not the executive. But I do this with the executives too. I say two things. I said, look, first of all, because see, this is part of that automatic interpretive reframing. You're probably not the first consultant that showed up. So you're being viewed before you even open your mouth. You're being viewed in comparison to every bad consultant they ever had. Now, you can't convince them that you're not a bad consultant, but you can at least create awareness that that's what they're doing. And the way I do it is I say, look, I'm here. I want you to be clear. I'm here. You know things I don't know. I have a lot of experience because this is my life. So I've seen a lot of things you haven't seen. So I know that more than you, but you know your business. And I remember one time there's a guy we were meeting on Monday, and this guy just been hired on Thursday. And I pointed to him. I said, Tom knows more than I do. And that was a joke. He did know more than I did. He was in terms of the company. He'd just been there for 2 days, and he knew more than I did about their company because he'd gone through indoctrination. So I let them know they know something I don't. People are only competent in particular domains. And
Hmm.
then the second thing I do is I say, I'm going to give a lot of assertions. In other words, I'm going to say a variety of things are true. An assertion, the technical definition is I'm saying this is true and I have evidence for it. And I would say, when I say something that I say is true, I'm not going to give you the evidence for it. I want you to give me the evidence for it. That seems weird, doesn't it? I said, now, if you can't give me the evidence for it, then we have a basis of a conversation. That means I have to explain it more. You might disagree with me. Great. Now we have a conversation to discuss it. But if you have evidence for it, you don't have to believe me. Never believe what a consultant says. And I don't mean that like that they're dishonest or things like that. I mean it because if you can't understand it yourself, they have not done their job explaining it properly. See, that's why I come from problems now instead of theory. People don't want theory. They want to solve their problems.
Right.
They're aware of their problems. So then if I talk about their problems and how what action you could take to solve their problems, then I can give them the theory. Then it was like, well, why did that work? Or you give them two or three solutions and it all comes down to the physics of flow I mentioned earlier. Then they're interested. But most people, see, consultants have a different mindset, more or less. If a consultant is there to actually see your problem and see what's going on, that's a different mindset than most of the practitioners. Not necessarily different from executives or managers who might be more abstract thinking and strategic thinking. But most people just want to get their job done. So you've got to learn how to talk to them from their perspective, and then you got to bridge it step by step by step to where it is more effective. Not where you think they need to be, but where they can see they'll be more effective.
I wish we had more time, my friend. You've given a lot of
This has been
value.
fun. Yeah,
Oh, absolutely. I wish, again, I do wish we had more time. I know for a fact I'm gonna have to listen back to this because you dropped so much gems and so much knowledge for the audience. For those listening, I'll go ahead and leave Al's information down below in the
please.
show notes. If you guys have questions for him or want to work with him or again have questions for him, don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks for
Yeah, I
listening. Go for it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I love to talk to people, and I have programs that are very inexpensive that people can come in and get a lot of value for. So it's easy to test me out that way as well. And as you can tell, I'm not tight-lipped like I was 40 years ago.
No, you're good. You're a changed man for the better. You've definitely grown.
Yeah.
Thank you, Al.
Well,
Anyways,
thank you,
guys,
Jordan. Appreciate it. Take
you
care.
take care.